I'm Tim Monroe, and this is what I really want to talk about. Everyone has a passion and a story to tell, something that lights them up. On this show, we talk to fascinating people about the things that really matter to them and to all of us. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's deep. Every time, we learn something new. It's what I really want to talk about. And if you want to be part of this ongoing conversation, let me know. My email is tsmonroe001@gmail.com. My guest today is Shaniqua Robinson. Shaniqua currently serves as the executive director of the Association for Teaching Black History in Kentucky, a Berea College-based organization dedicated to partnering with educators across the Commonwealth to develop curriculum that centers the often overlooked voices of Black Kentuckians. A native of Mount Sterling, Kentucky, Shaniqua has dedicated over a decade to the field of education across both public and private institutions. She has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Kentucky, followed by a Master of Arts in Teaching from the University of Cumberland. Berea College, Shaniqua previously served as Field Placement Coordinator, where she designed and managed a 3-stage clinical experience for pre-service teachers. She's also served as a visiting instructor in the Education Studies Department. Deeply committed to both history and education, Shaniqua believes that access to an accurate and inclusive historical narrative is essential to preparing informed and engaged citizenship. Through her leadership, she works to expand and enrich educational opportunities for students across Kentucky. She resides in Richmond, Kentucky with her husband, Collis, and their 3 sons, Trey, Andre, and Langston. You're a busy person, Shaniqua.
Very busy.
So welcome, Shaniqua. What do you really want to talk about today?
Today, I really want to talk about reclaiming my Appalachian roots as a Black woman.
Amazing. Reclaiming your Appalachian. So the implication being that you hadn't claimed them previously. You're just sort of, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's before we dive into that, and we certainly will, I'd like to sort of get a little background. Let's start at the beginning. So
Okay.
you're born and raised in Mount Sterling, right? Not far from here.
Not far.
Yeah.
About an hour.
Okay. So briefly kind of describe the journey that you took from a little girl in Mount Sterling to where you are now. I don't mean physically, but where you are now, but like how you got to be who you are. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So growing up in Mount Sterling, I have very fond memories of childhood. I've always been a teacher's pet. So I've always loved school. I've always loved just like going to school, reading, getting the gold star on my papers. So I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher. And I went to college at UK and I was like, okay, being a teacher doesn't really sound that cool anymore. I'm going to explore some other options. And so I went through this whole thing where I thought I would become a lawyer. And somehow I ended up right back where I started and ended up becoming a teacher.
Yeah.
And so I started teaching elementary school. And I was a 3rd grade math teacher, which was not my ministry.
No.
Those poor kids, they're graduating this year, and I see some of them getting scholarships. So I'm like, maybe they can do math after all. Maybe they can multiply. Yeah, I didn't ruin them.
Yeah.
And so I finally made it to where I made my home, which was 5th grade social studies. I really love history and all the things. So I did that for several years. And then after the pandemic, I thought that I kind of wanted something a little different. So I ended up here at Berea College in Ed Studies, where I was covering Dr. Robillard's sabbatical. So I was able to teach all of the elementary methods courses, which was amazing. And then shortly after that, the opportunity with the association opened up, and here I am.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Well, and also, not parenthetically, you've been building a family, right?
Yes.
So that's keeping you very busy.
Very busy.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Association of Teaching Black History in Kentucky.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
You got it right.
Okay.
It's a mouthful.
It's kind of a mouthful, yeah. So tell us about the mission of that organization and sort of your role in it.
Yeah, so our work really centers on partnering with K-12 teachers across the state, teachers who are interested in not only learning more about Kentucky's Black history, but also engaging in the writing of curriculum around Kentucky's Black history and implementing that into their classrooms. So we have a fellowship that we offer every year where we bring in a cohort of teachers. We provide them with professional development opportunities, travel opportunities to kind of immerse ourselves in those experiences. And together we write a series of lesson plans that live on our website.
Okay.
That is totally open and free to the public so that other teachers can log onto our website, pull those lessons, and hopefully start to implement some of our stuff into their classrooms as well.
Yeah, that's great. I started as you may know, I started my career as a teacher, and I know how resources like that are so valuable because teachers are so busy and they're like, I want to teach this, but where can I find the place to sort of, lay this out for my students? So that's amazing. So how did you get to that role? Like, what was it that sort of attracted you to that role?
Yeah. So history has really always been my thing. When I was in undergrad at UK, I was a history major. Mm-hmm. Again, I kind of had no idea what I was really going to do. My mom was like, what are you going to do with a history degree?
Like most humanities majors.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know. Maybe run a museum or something.
Right.
She was like, well, okay, whatever.
Cool.
Yeah. So it was really an opportunity to marry my two interests of history and then education as well in a way that allows me to still do the work that I really love, but not necessarily have to be in a classroom of my own. I'm able to kind of expand my reach and help teachers who want to get into this work but maybe aren't sure how to do so.
Well, and also helping to promote, an interesting aspect of history here, and we'll get into that. And I don't want to go too far down this road because I really want to get to your reclaiming your Appalachian roots, but one question that is sort of in the air right now in our country, very relevant to what you're doing at the association, is this sort of pushback against teaching the sort of more difficult aspects of our history, of U.S. history, right? And some of those difficult aspects, very difficult aspects, include the history of slavery, the history of civil rights, the history of discrimination in America, and you've heard some people say, well, we don't want people to feel bad because they learned about slavery, it made them feel bad.
Yes.
So what do you say to people like that? And I don't want to turn this into a political polemic, but, how do you push back on that kind of conversation?
Yeah, so really we look at it from the perspective of, first of all, teaching an inclusive and complete history really benefits all students in the classroom. We really want students to be able to engage with primary source documents and different narratives and things like that, so they're able to come to their own conclusions that are based in fact and documents. But then also, I think that not only is it an opportunity for students, but it's also an opportunity for teachers.
Yeah.
Because, growing up, the education that we got around Black history was really Black History Month. We would talk about the Civil Rights Movement and Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and that's it.
Yeah.
So thinking about how we can expand upon what we've been doing and, how we can better serve the students by doing research and learning what actually happened in our own communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think it's such important work. And the way I think about it is Black history is American history. There's no difference. It's all part of American history, right?
Yep.
And so there isn't sort of a corner where we should teach Black history separate from everything else. But your organization makes people really able to integrate it into whatever else they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that our teaching standards are written, there is absolutely space for this sort of work, right?
Yeah.
So how can we tell the story of the American Revolution without telling the story of slavery in the colonies and those enslaved Africans who fought on behalf of different sides of that war?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one thing you said to me, so kind of make a little transition here into talking more about your roots, is that maybe this role at the association has, in some sense, sort of pushed you to think more about, your Appalachian roots. So in what way did that happen for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always known that my grandmother's family was from a small holler called Hawkins Branch in Menifee County, Kentucky.
Okay.
And so,
Where exactly is Menifee geographically? North, south, east?
so as a social studies teacher, geography is
Not
not
your-
my
not your
strong suit, but it is
It's in eastern
right
Kentucky
there.
somewhere.
It's
Yeah.
in eastern Kentucky.
Yeah.
It's right there along the Cave Run Lake.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
People should know that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've always known that she and her siblings come from that area. However, I never considered myself Appalachian. But kind of after doing some of this work that I currently do, I've come across Frank X. Walker and some of his work around Appalachia and Crystal Wilkinson. And I'm like, hey, this actually sounds like something that I identify with. I want to explore this a little bit more.
And it's interesting, Shaniqua, that how things come together. So the last two interviews I've done have been with Sam Gleaves, who's a musician, Appalachian, Rick Childers, who's a writer, also native Appalachian,
Yeah.
and a lot of the conversation was about their Appalachian roots and how they became writers and musicians, etc. And I think a lot of the stereotypes, and there's a million of them, right, around what is Appalachia, who lives in Appalachia, what's it all about, is that a lot of people think that it's generally a white place.
Exactly.
And we know that's not true, and that there's been an African American presence in Appalachia from the very, very beginning. So when you think of those folks back in Menifee County, your people,
Yeah.
right? What were they doing there? Do you know? Like, what was their, were they farming? What were they doing?
Yeah, so my family actually owned a farm for a few generations, and my great-grandfather, his name was Jerd Manier, he farmed the land, and then my grandmother and her siblings helped with that farming. He was one of 10 siblings, and they all, I believe, worked that land. His father worked that land as well. And so right now I'm actually in the middle of kind of doing some family genealogy and research. So I've made it as far back as my grandmother's grandfather. And so far they have been on that land, that farm that belonged to our family.
So you mentioned Frank X. Walker and Crystal Wilkinson, who I'd love to talk about more later.
Yeah.
And these are Black Appalachians.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about this can be a wide-ranging conversation, but what really has been the experience of the Black community in Appalachia?
Yeah, so interesting. A little side story. My whole life, up until literally December 31st of 2025, my mom worked for the federal government, the Black Lung Office. And so my whole life, I always heard my mom talk about coal miners and specifically Black coal miners in like Harlan and like far eastern Kentucky, Alabama, places like that. And so you hear more, I would say, about those experiences of Black folks living in those coal towns, working in the mines, what race relations looked like kind of in that setting. Where I'm from, where my family is from, there weren't really coal mines. So again, it was more like an agriculture type community and work and things like that. So I think that there's kind of like a spectrum, I guess, of what life looked like for Black people living in Appalachia, depending on the geographic region that you're in.
So a couple years ago, I went on the Appalachian tour that they do here at Berea, and I went into it knowing very, very little about the area, having heard stereotypes, and sort of trying to beat those out of myself. But one of the places we visited, and I don't know if you've ever been there, is Lynch, Kentucky, which was a huge, booming coal mining town at one point. Many of the residents, if not most, were Black, were African American. And, the coal mines just all of a sudden went away. But there was a small community of folks still living there, all retired, all older. All the younger people had left because there was very little opportunity in Lynch. But I heard these amazing stories of how back in the day, like in the 50s and 60s, Lynch was amazing. It was this booming place where, this woman was talking to me. She said, we had the best of everything. Our schools were great. We had these incredible stores where you could buy anything.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was kind of a boom town. And at one point there were like 50,000 people living there. Now I don't even know if there's 1,000. But these folks were still there hanging on. And hearing their stories was just, to me, was so eye-opening that here's this community of folks doing what, Appalachians were doing at the time. And it was just, it changed my perspective entirely about what Appalachia's all about.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually never been to Lynch before, but I recently read, the past couple of years, Harlan Renaissance by William Turner, and just kind of reading about his experience in Appalachia, and specifically thinking about the schools and the community and how students that went to the schools, how they felt that their education was really a fantastic education. Their teachers were amazing, really centering the stories of Black Americans, and a really big emphasis on, academic excellence and all of these things. And then thinking about how integration into white schools kind of deteriorated their educational experience. I thought that piece was really interesting.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're talking Harlan Renaissance with an N.
Yes, Harlan.
Harlan, Kentucky, yeah. And actually, William Turner talked to the tour group before we went out on the bus and toured around. Yeah, so he really helped us understand all of this. So for a young Black woman like you to identify as an Appalachian, what sort of does that change about your sort of identity and how you see yourself?
Yeah, so really, the majority of my life, I always considered myself to be Southern. Right? So I know that people outside of Kentucky really have a hard time accepting Kentucky as a Southern state. There's a lot of contention around that.
Yeah.
But I do hold that Kentucky is a Southern state.
I think it is. I agree.
Yeah, and so I always considered myself to be Southern. It wasn't until I met my husband, who is from South Carolina, and he was like, you're not really Southern. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm obviously the picture of a Southern belle.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was right. I think that my family traditions, our food ways, I think that they more closely align with Appalachia.
Yeah.
Right. And so I can always point to my grandmother. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother at her house as a kid, and just thinking about the foods that she cooked, the way that she speaks, very Appalachian, and those traditions, of course, have been passed down to us as well.
Yeah. So what are the differences there, though? Like, between, say, thinking of yourself as Southern and thinking of yourself as Appalachian, maybe you just didn't see the difference, and you thought one was the other.
Yeah, and I think that for me, I always considered Appalachian to be white, right? So in order to be Appalachian, you had to be white.
Right.
And that's not the case.
I think a lot of people think that.
Yeah, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
So, thinking about, I'm really like drawn to food right now. The recipes after reading Crystal Wilkinson's book, Praise Song for the Kitchen Ghost, and how, her cooking is her connection to her ancestors,
Right.
who, lived in Appalachia. And I think the same for me. I think about recipes that my grandmother cooks. One recipe that I'm thinking of specifically is hash and cornbread. Not a Southern dish. I think that is definitely an Appalachian dish.
Yeah.
One of my favorite dishes.
Yeah.
For sure. So.
Yeah, and it again, sort of one of the themes that runs through a lot of the interviews I've done is the ways in which, and not every interview is about Appalachia, but there's a lot of Appalachians around here.
Yes,
so
at Berea College.
Yeah. So the ways in which the Appalachian culture is expressed through music, through writing, through art, or through cuisine, through cooking, and just like you're saying, just the ways you live.
Yes.
Right. And it's just fascinating how people connect so deeply to those things, those cultural expressions, and connect them to their identity as Appalachian. You know? And it's sometimes a feeling like so for me, a kid who grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, like there's things about Chicago that I really relate to and connect with, and they're part of my identity, but not in the same sort of really kind of powerful way that it feels like those things are expressed around here. So is this something you've just started to sort of think about?
Yeah. So I'm also thinking about the connection to the land and the geography, the proximity to the mountains. And I think that being here at Berea College has really forced me to kind of think about my identity and what it means to be Appalachian and what that experience looks like. And I've been really grateful for that time to reflect and kind of delineate, am I Southern? Am I Appalachian? What makes the most sense here?
Yeah, it's so cool. And you were talking about your mother working in the Black Lung office, and there being a lot of Black coal miners in Appalachia over the years. And one of the things that really connected with me is my grandfather was the first member of his family not to work in a coal mine.
Oh, wow.
This was in Pennsylvania. And so when I was on this Appalachian tour and seeing, these places where these coal mines used to be, and the difficulties of it and the sort of labor unrest and all that stuff, it really resonated with me. And part of me was thinking, like, I'm kind of Appalachian in a sense, because that's where I come from too, these coal mines. So it can be a powerful pull. So let's talk more about sort of this one cultural expression that I particularly love, which is cooking.
Yes.
And eating.
Yes. All of the things.
Yeah, all the things. So you talked about Crystal Wilkinson.
Yeah.
So how has she been inspirational for you?
Yeah. So Crystal Wilkinson was really the person who actually verbalized and said, hey, it's okay to claim your Appalachian roots later in life, right? Like, you don't have to have been born and raised, in the mountains and have had this particular experience to, especially as a Black woman, to be like, you know what? Hey, I think that I have a claim to this identity and I want to walk in that right now.
Yeah, I actually, when you talked about Crystal Wilkinson, so you might not know this about me, but I love to cook.
Oh, your chili was delicious.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
And it's just been fairly recently. My wife is really an incredible cook. She can cook anything, no recipe. She's amazing.
That's awesome.
But she doesn't have much time for it these days.
I would imagine.
Yeah. But so I do most of the cooking. Whenever we cook, it's usually me. But I love doing it. So I did a little research into Crystal Wilkinson. I found a couple of really interesting quotations from her book, which is Praise Songs for the Kitchen Ghost.
Yes.
I think. Okay. So here's one. People are always surprised that Black people reside in the hills of Appalachia. Those not surprised that we were there are surprised that we stayed. My family lived in the hills of Kentucky for 4 generations. My grandmother came from a long line of women who worked hard and cooked well. the long lists of food I'll describe here, and I won't go into the list, but I'll describe here will make you think my folks had deep pockets, but they didn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that quote really speaks to where I am right now in my personal journey. So thinking about my lineage in Appalachia, I've learned that my great grandmother in her government records was listed as mulatto, which obviously indicates there was some sort of like mixed race there, which we could probably infer was white. And so thinking about the struggles that my family endured, not only just, simply because they were Black people, couple that with the very specific struggles and difficulties that simply exist just by living in Appalachia, just the geography
no matter who you are.
of Appalachia. Yeah. So thinking about the lineage, I sit and I am just very grateful and humbled and honored to come from a line of such strong men and women.
Yeah. The little bit I've read about Appalachia makes me think that, there's a lot of people ascribe a sense of poverty and scarcity and difficult living to the region, the Appalachian region. And, there's lots of well-documented stories about things like the opioid epidemic and that kind of thing. But I think what really emerges is that, for me, is that this is a place where people are just really resilient.
Right.
And very self-reliant, like maybe more than anywhere else in the country, because geographically, a lot of people are very isolated in Appalachia, and they have to take care of themselves, right? It's not easy to run down to whatever, the grocery store or anywhere else. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and so what I'm kind of learning is a little bit about the configuration of the holler that my family came from. And so there's this component of community, right? So like all of my great-grandfather's siblings kind of lived in proximity. Some of them moved away, but, there were siblings, there were cousins, there were aunts and uncles who kind of lived in this area together. So I would imagine that there was, a lot of helping out of one another, making sure families weren't going without, and things like that, and really doing, what you could to make sure everybody was good and everybody survived.
Do you have grandparents that are still alive?
Yeah, I have 3 of 4 grandparents that are still alive.
So here's a suggestion. Before it's too late, sit down, ask them questions about their childhood, record it. This has come up a couple different times now. So I did this when I was like you when I was younger. I loved history, and I was very curious about the history of my family, especially the sort of coal mining thing. And my grandfather, who I said was the first one to not work in a coal mine, became very successful business person. And so I sat down with him. This was in the 70s, with a cassette tape. And, and that cassette tape is lost to the world. And I just regret it because there were stories. And just like the recording of what life was like when he was a boy living in this coal mining town, I really wish I had that now.
I do actually plan to do just that because you're right. Like those stories are invaluable. And the perspective that my grandparents have, having been born in the 40s, I would really love to kind of hear those stories of their experiences and things like that. My paternal grandmother, Granny Gail, she passed away 10 or 12 years ago. Her family is actually from Western Kentucky, the Paducah area. And her father, Arbin, was actually a coal miner in like the western coal fields. He actually passed away of black lung disease. So I think that is an interesting story as well.
I also think the story of the women, Appalachian women,
Yeah.
is particularly interesting. My great grandmother, so my grandfather's mother, he was an only child. Her husband worked in the coal mine, and she was very tough, and she was determined that her son would get an education.
Yes.
And not be a coal miner. So she did whatever she could to make sure that happened. And he had all kinds of stories about how that, came to be. And without her, I wouldn't be here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you're absolutely correct. The strength of an Appalachian woman is unmatched. My grandmother, was that first generation to come out of the holler to a really small community in Bath County called Sharpsburg. And she, had 3 children of her own. She had to, at 13, she actually had to go and be a domestic worker for a prominent white family in that town. And so she did that kind of work for a while. And then, she was off to the factories as she got older. And her daughter, my mother, was the first in the family to actually go to college and to get a college degree. And I think without my grandmother's strength and sacrifice, I certainly would not be in the position that I'm in today.
Yeah, we all stand on the shoulders of lots and lots of people.
Absolutely.
So let's talk. Let's have some fun and talk more about food.
Please. Yes.
So you mentioned before a recipe.
Yes.
Hash
and cornbread.
Okay.
Yes.
So how do you make that?
Okay,
what's
so
in that?
I admittedly have not mastered this yet. I cannot get the consistency correct.
Yeah,
but
you're working on it.
I'm working on it, right?
Yeah.
So traditionally, it's a recipe that you can just use what you have on hand, leftovers. So like the protein part of that sometimes is like leftover chicken, or if it's Thanksgiving, leftover turkey. And it's like a gravy broth base with your leftover meat and potatoes and veggies. And then in my family, we really like fried cornbread.
Okay.
So, you make the batter and then like fry it in a cast iron skillet.
Okay, yeah.
With some oil and then put some butter on top.
Yeah.
And then you pour the hash on top and that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. I would love to have that right
Yeah,
now.
I was going to say, maybe what are we having for lunch?
Yeah, I would love to have that.
That sounds really good. So what else, and maybe are there recipes in Crystal Wilkinson's book that were particularly attractive to you?
Yeah, so I was really shocked, and I don't know why I was shocked, but in the book, she references a recipe called jam cake.
Jam cake.
And my grandmother always makes jam cake, especially around the holidays. And people in our community really love her jam cake. My mom has made jam cake as well. It's a little bit too many ingredients for me to really want to do that right now. But that just kind of shows like that it has those Appalachian roots.
Yeah.
In that recipe, it's essentially like a spice cake with like a caramel drizzle on top.
Yeah.
It has nuts in it, so that's not my favorite thing, but it's a crowd pleaser.
Yeah. I'm afraid of baking. Like I don't do a lot of baking.
Yeah.
Because it's intimidating.
It's not my thing.
To me. Yeah. Cooking, you can just throw stuff in, But actually, you mentioned jam cake. That one of the sort of passages that I pulled out of her book was, it's not from her book, but it's about her. It says, years ago, when Crystal Wilkinson was baking a jam cake, she felt her late grandmother's presence. She soon realized that she was not the only cook in the kitchen. There were her ancestors, too, stirring, measuring, and braising alongside her. These are her kitchen ghosts. 5 generations of Black women who settled in Appalachia and made a life, a legacy, and a cuisine.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that is very true. I think that cooking and baking are ways that we can certainly spend time with our ancestors. For Christmas, let's say maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, the only thing that I wanted for Christmas was for my mom and my grandmother to write down literally all of their recipes.
Yeah.
and give them to me. And it took a little time. So I didn't get it on Christmas, but I did get it on my birthday, which was in March. So not that much later.
Yeah.
And it's full of recipes, cooking recipes, baking recipes. And when I am cooking, I certainly feel that connection to them, and I feel that connection to my home in Appalachia.
Yeah. And that connection is so cool. I'm a little jealous of that. My mom was not a great cook, but she worked. I mean, she was a busy person.
Right.
She had four kids, and she worked full time.
I understand that for sure.
And like cooking was a job. Like it wasn't like a joy for her. But
I understand that.
A couple times a year there'd be something she would get really into. And she's very Irish. My mother's maiden name's Murphy.
Okay.
And so corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day. And she used to make this delicious, well, I don't really like it, but everybody else loved it, split pea soup.
Okay.
Which she would put ham in and everything. Yeah. So those connections to the past. And the other thing you're making me think of is, so Cheryl, my wife, she's the oldest of four girls, and her mom was an incredible cook, incredible homemaker cook, incredible. And she had this box of recipes, mostly written on those little cards, almost like a card catalog card, and mostly handwritten. She also had beautiful handwriting.
Yes.
And one of, I think this is the way it worked. She's passed away, but one of Cheryl's sisters has, if not all of those.
Yes.
So it's often when Cheryl's cooking something, she'll have to call her sister and say, pull out this recipe? I can't, but they have a lot of them there, and just preserving that is amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah. And all of my grandmother's cookbooks, she has like handwritten recipes in the cookbooks. There's like food stains and things on the pages where she's used them.
Yeah.
And so when the day comes that my grandmother passes away, I'm saying this on air to all of my cousins. Those cookbooks are mine.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. I think I've started to collect cookbooks too, and I don't have that many, but you can definitely tell the recipes I've made when you thumb through the book. I'm not the neatest of cooks. So you can definitely, you've made this one a few times, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like I love the internet, and I shouldn't say I love the internet, but I love the ability to access all kinds of recipes on the internet, and I do that all the time. But there's something about that physical artifact, whether it's a recipe card or a book, or that maybe people have written notes in the margin, like, use less of this or more of that, or that's really sort of connects you to something a little bit deeper. You have 4 hungry boys at your house. I'm including your husband.
Yes, I was going to say there's a big one there too.
There's a big boy too. Yeah, he's a pretty big boy.
Yes.
Do they like this Appalachian cuisine? Have you like sort of gotten them into it?
Yes. So all of them love to eat.
Yeah.
I think all of them will agree that I am a pretty decent cook.
That's good to hear.
However, they will all agree that I am their last choice of cook. They far prefer my mother and my grandmother's meals.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name which boy it is, but one of them says that my family's cooking is why they cannot lose weight. So, there's a lot of cooking going on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's cool. I hope they either learn to appreciate the Appalachian cuisine, and I bet they will.
Yes.
I bet they will eventually. But so what's the cooking sort of world like for you? Because like my mother, you're super busy, like full-time job and all that. So how do you find time to sort of cook in this way? Yeah.
So our 2 older boys are 9 and 10.
Right. Yeah.
It's always some sort of sports season or some sort of obligation in the evening. So cooking every night is really difficult.
Yeah.
We try to get, 3 or so solid cooked meals in a week. But I will say during the holidays, we really make a point to cook recipes, spend time together, really be in community and enjoy one another over those recipes. And my oldest son, Trey, he loves cooking as well.
Oh, good.
So he, I think, is going to be the one to kind of carry on those foodway traditions over the years.
I found for me, Sundays are when I can cook.
Oh,
And it becomes like the afternoon activity, right? And sometimes I like to find sort of a complicated thing where it will take me all afternoon and then make enough so that like we have that for, the next
week.
3 or 4 days. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say growing up, Sundays were the day that I knew that I was going to get a really delicious home-cooked meal from my grandmother's house after church. I have so many memories of just, food and a house full of people who, were not even in our immediate family, but they know that Barbara's food is so good, so they're going to come down and have some too. So food just really kind of being the center of joy and community in the Appalachian culture. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, Shaniqua, another thread that's run through a lot of these interviews I've done is this idea of people gathering, people coming together, whether it's around music or it's just something that brings people together. And in the world we live in now, which can be very isolating. Like people, you can sit and scroll through your phone and you see so many kids now just walking around without looking up ever, looking at their phone. And so many things that are kind of pushing us to isolate. And this is one of those things, I think, cooking that can bring people together, food that can bring people together. And, we've talked a lot about this idea of a third space in the world, right? So, home is one, work is two, and then the third space is another place where you go, but you with people, right? Not by yourself.
Yeah, and we're really kind of losing those spaces.
We're losing them.
Yeah.
And food is one way to bring people together, even if it's someone else's house.
Yes.
And I just think that it's such deep connections to culture and to history. And so to sort of bring this back full circle a little bit, in your role in the Association of Teaching Black History in Kentucky, there must be opportunities to think about this idea of Appalachian cuisine and maybe Black Appalachian cuisine and turn it into a lesson plan. Like, you think about that?
Yes. So our teachers within the association are amazing.
Yeah.
And we have two teachers, Kim Yates from Pineville Independent and Elise Carter from Fort Thomas Independent. And those two ladies teamed up and actually did a series of lessons on just that. Nice. So they were able to connect like traditional Black dishes and traditional Appalachian dishes and trace those foodways back to the western coast of Africa. And so together they kind of worked through like this inquiry-based history lesson, but also tied in like elements of technology where students were able to use like Google Earth and kind of map out the ways in which food came from Africa to specifically Kentucky.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
It's sort of trying to bring that all together. And this is why history is so important.
Yes.
Like, the stories are just amazing, and like, it's everything. And that's really what we should be focused on. So just sort of try to wrap this up a little bit. As you go forward, you're in, your second year in this position?
This is my second year. I'm going into my third year this summer.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. How's it going? I mean, is it feel like the right thing for you?
It is going great.
Yeah.
I will admit I was a little nervous about what, our work would look like this year specifically. But there are so many teachers and really expanding, the term educator. So teachers and community center employees and museum employees and just like kind of like grassroots folks that are so very interested in this work despite the political climate that we're in right now.
Or maybe because of it.
Because of it. And so folks are still just kind of coming to us like really hungry for this information. and these experiences, and wanting to know like what they can do to kind of first, uncover these stories, and then how can we get these stories to the children, right? Like to kind of carry on the names of those unsung heroes that, never really got the opportunity or the recognition that they deserved.
Yeah, and I think one thing recent. Sam Gleaves, who's a musician that I interviewed recently, he called it Appalachian cultures with an S. There's not one; there are many, and sometimes they combine, but sometimes they don't. And there's many of them, and it's like everywhere. There are these cultures within our country, all of which need to be understood and elevated. So, as a mother of 3 boys. Because I worry about boys a little bit, but as a mother of 3 boys, what would you like them to sort of remember or know or understand about their Appalachian roots?
Yeah, so I would really want them to carry just kind of this spirit of resiliency and identity, like knowing who you are and where you come from and being proud of that. And understanding that their identity is really unique, right? So really leaning into that and being confident in who they are as they go out into the world.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sort of wrap things up, that we all need to be proud of who we are and where we came from.
Absolutely.
No matter who we are. And those stories through the teaching of history need to be out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your work, and thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really fun. We've kind of bounced around a little bit.
Absolutely.
But I've really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. This was awesome.
Great. Thank you, Shaniqua.
All right. Thank you.
What I Really Want to Talk About is produced and recorded in the studios of Berea College News and Radio in Berea, Kentucky. You can learn more about this podcast and listen to all of the previous episodes at whatireallywantotalkabout.com. My contact information is on the website, so please get in touch with me if there's something that you really want to talk about. I'm Tim Monroe. Thanks for listening.